A young girl dares to stand up in a dojo filled with laughter and mockery, simply because she believes her grandfather was a karate legend. But when she's slapped across the face for speaking the truth, she doesn't cry. She chooses to fight. And what happens next brings all of America to a stunned silence. This isn't just a story about karate, it's about stolen honor, buried truths, and the courage of a child brave enough to uncover a history of lies. No one expected a Tuesday afternoon karate practice to end with a loud slap and a media storm that followed. Emily Carter, 13 years old, wearing round glasses and her hair tied back neatly, walked into the dojo like any other day. She wasn't the fastest or the toughest kid in the group, but there was one thing that made her stand out: her absolute respect for martial arts and a secret she kept to herself. The practice was going normally when Sensei Brad Tucker, the head coach, gathered the group into a circle to talk about the spirit of martial arts. One boy bragged that his dad had studied karate in Japan. Others chatted excitedly about uncles, cousins, and grandfathers who had won this or that competition. Emily gave a slight smile and whispered, "My grandfather was the heavyweight world champion in 1983. That seemingly harmless statement somehow reached Sensei Brad's ears. He spun around, eyes cold as ice. "What did you say? Who's your grandfather?" Emily hesitated. "Frank Carter. You wouldn't know him, sir. Slap!" The sound cut off all explanations. The slap landed hard on Emily's left cheek, knocking her glasses to the floor. The room fell completely silent. Some students covered their mouths while an older kid quickly pulled out his phone to start recording. "Don't make up stories in my dojo," Brad snapped, eyes blazing. "Frank Carter is a disgrace in the martial arts world, a fraud banned from the Federation. How dare you bring that name into my class?" Emily didn't cry. She didn't fight back. She bent down to pick up her glasses, then looked up, her eyes slightly misty but shining with defiance. "My grandfather didn't lie, and he once defeated your master." The entire room shook. The tension exploded. Brad froze for half a second. Then he hissed, "Get out, now." Emily walked out, fists clenched, but her steps were as steady as a rock. Inside her burned not fear, but a slow, smoldering spark. The fire had just been lit. Outside, the video of the slap went viral. Overnight, it hit nearly 2 million views with the title, "Karate Coach Slaps 13-year-old for Mentioning Her Grandpa. Watch her epic response." The story was just beginning, and Emily, unaware, was about to unearth a past buried for almost 40 years. A battle not just for her, but for a man who had been rejected by the world simply for telling the truth. The next morning, Emily woke up to the constant buzzing of her phone. The screen was bright, hundreds of messages flashing. "Are you the girl who got slapped? Is it true your grandpa was a world champion? Your video is going viral." But Emily didn't smile. The red mark on her left cheek was still there. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection, wondering if she had the courage to keep going. Downstairs, her mother, Sarah, was nervously talking on the phone. Every time Emily entered the room, she would immediately stop. The atmosphere in the house suddenly thickened like fog. Emily knew her mother never liked talking about her grandfather. Frank Carter, the forbidden name in the family. In the past, whenever Emily asked, her mother's reply was curt, "He's not a good role model." But now, after last night's slap, Emily felt she needed to know the truth. That afternoon, while her mother was at work, Emily sneaked into the basement. After an hour of dusting and moving old boxes, she found a small wooden box with a rusty lock. Inside were faded photographs. A tall man in a white karate gi stood on a winner's podium with a gold medal. Below the photo, a handwritten note read, "Frank Carter, World Karate Heavyweight Champion 1983, Tokyo." Emily ran upstairs. This wasn't a childish boast. This was the truth. At the same time, her phone buzzed. Breaking news. Sensei Brad suspended for violent behavior toward a student. Online community demands investigation into match-fixing scandals in the American martial arts world. Emily felt everything was shifting. But to find justice for herself and her grandfather, she needed to meet him. This is Go Fresh for Old Corcoras. The man lived in an old trailer on the edge of Pine Hill, more than 40 miles from Emily's home. Rumors said he had gone crazy after the scandal, punched a referee, and was even banned for life for cheating. Emily didn't know what was true. That evening, as the rain began to fall, she got on the bus, clutching the photo tightly. her heart pounding. No warning. No mother by her side. Just determination and one big question in her mind. Grandpa, what really happened in 1983? Then, under the dim lights at the last stop, an older man with silver hair and a slight hunch sat on a wooden bench, eyes fixed on the distant mountains. Emily stepped closer, holding her breath. Are you Frank Carter? He turned around, eyes misty but deep. You're Emily? A cold breeze swept by, as if carrying a past waiting to be uncovered. Frank Carter stared at the girl with eyes so deep they seemed to hold a lifetime. He didn't stand up or smile. He just nodded slightly. You've grown up, he said in a hoarse voice, probably from not speaking much. Emily was silent. Though she wanted to shout hundreds of questions, she hesitated. The man before her didn't look like a martial arts legend, just a tired old man living quietly in the mountains. You know what happened at the dojo, Emily said, clutching the photo tightly. I got slapped just for saying you were the world champion. Frank sighed. He glanced toward the worn training bag by the chair, still bearing a faded name tag. F. Carter, Team USA. He quietly said, You shouldn't have come here, Emily. Some things people don't want to remember. But I need to know the truth, Emily blurted out. Mom never said anything about you. Everyone calls you a cheat, a violent man. But I don't believe it. Silence stretched between them. The rain began to fall softly. Frank stood up and slowly walked into the old trailer. He motioned for Emily to follow. In the small room, the dim yellow light reflected off old medals hanging on the wall, proof of a glorious past. He pulled an old cassette tape from a drawer, set it on the table, then quietly said, In 1983, I was the world champion. But a week later, they said I won because I bribed the referee. The press swarmed. I didn't explain, didn't fight back, just stayed silent and disappeared. Why? Emily asked, eyes wide. In front of her, Frank quietly poured 2 cups of tea, the gentle scent of mint drifting in the air, but his eyes seemed to look through time, far away. You're asking why I left the martial arts world? He sat down, his hands slightly trembling, then gave a faint smile. All right, it's time you knew the truth. Emily looked up. Frank rarely talked about the past, but this time his voice deepened. Each word weighed heavily in the room around them. In 1983, I competed at the World Karate Championship in Tokyo. In the final round, I beat a fighter from Canada, a kid named Mason Dean, a skilled but hot-headed brawler. I won by technical points, by the rules. Emily nodded, focused. The problem was, after the match, as I stepped backstage, Mason ambushed me in a quiet hallway. He refused to accept defeat, thinking I had cheated. He lunged, attacking me from behind. I just turned to block reflexively, and unfortunately, my counterstrike broke his arm. Her eyes widened. So, the incident didn't happen in the ring? No, Frank said firmly, but the press didn't care about the truth. Less than a day later, there was Mason's picture with a cast on his arm on the front page. The news said I, the American fighter, lost control and attacked my opponent after the match in revenge. No one asked me a single question. Emily went silent. The one behind twisting the truth, Frank said, his eyes darkening, was Mason's coach. Also Brad's father, the same coach who just slapped you. Emily's mouth fell open. Brad's father made it all up? Frank nodded slowly. He had connections with some media people in the martial arts world. They edited videos, spread one-sided photos, even had people witness you attacking Mason. So, no one believed you? Frank smirked. Some old colleagues knew the truth. But then I got an offer. Emily leaned in. An offer? A thick envelope, cash, sent right to my door, no sender's name. Inside was a single note, let the past lie and disappear. The atmosphere grew heavy. I refused. Frank's voice grew deeper, and right after, I was erased from all rankings. My records disappeared from the Federation. They cut me out of group photos, canceled every invitation. It was like wiping ink off paper. Emily bit her lip. Because you wouldn't stay silent, the whole martial arts world turned their backs? Frank looked at her, eyes full of pain. I don't regret the fame, but I regret one thing, that no one ever stood up and said Frank was set up. Emily clenched her fists. More than ever, she understood this wasn't just about revenge or honor. This was the truth buried alive, and now it was time to dig it up. The early summer sunlight stretched across the roof of the old RV. Birds chirped softly through the branches, but nothing drowned out Emily's firm voice. Teach me, please. Frank turned around, surprised. He was still haunted by the echoes of his past story, a scar that had never fully healed. But the eyes of the girl before him now, they weren't like those of children chasing glory or fame. Those eyes held something deeper. Trust. Not to win a prize, Emily said, stepping forward. Not to prove to Brad who's better, but so people know you're not a liar. Frank looked at her for a long moment. Then he placed a hand on her shoulder and silently nodded. The first training session began the next morning. On the empty patch of land behind the RV, Frank drew a circle in the sand. "This is your ring," he said, "and if you want to stand strong here, you have to learn from the beginning." No flashy kicks, no spirited shouts, just basic moves, repeated until they became tedious. Stance, breathing, footwork. "You see how Brad strikes hard, right?" Frank asked during a break. "But if his balance is off, even a light touch can knock him down. Karate doesn't teach you to attack first. It teaches you to stand firm." Emily nodded, sweat running down her forehead. In the days that followed, they trained at dawn when the sunlight was still soft. At night, the two of them sat reading martial arts books, reviewing old tapes that Frank kept hidden in a tin box under the bed. Gradually, Emily's tentative steps became steady stances. The light punches that felt like brushing air turned into strikes that hit their marks. Frank began to smile, a smile he had lost for nearly 40 years. One evening, Frank opened a drawer and took out an old address book, tracing numbers with his trembling finger. Then he stopped at a name, Reed Callahan. "Who is he?" Emily asked. "An old friend," Frank replied. "A sports reporter. Back then, he doubted the story about me, but never dared speak up. Now it's different." He dialed the number. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then an old man's voice answered. "Hello?" Frank gripped the phone tightly. "Mike, it's Frank." Silence on the other end, then suddenly a deep laugh. "Frank? My God, I thought you were dead," Frank chuckled dryly. "Not dead, but an old truth is demanding to be brought back to life." The words hung in the air, but Emily knew this summer would not be an ordinary one. It was the beginning of a silent battle to reclaim the honor of a man the world had long forgotten. That morning, the Dallas Sports Center was packed. The Texas State Youth Martial Arts Championship was one of the most prestigious events for teenagers, drawing hundreds of martial artists from all over. Every dojo hoped to have a student win the trophy to boost their reputation. But among the crowd, there was one contestant focused on only one thing: family honor. Emily Carter stepped into the auditorium, head held high, hands gripping the worn black belt tied around her waist. That belt once belonged to Frank Carter, her grandfather. It had faded over time, but the scratches on the fabric still told a story of a proud yet bitter past. She registered, filling in her name, Emily Carter. And when that name was announced in the competition list, someone froze. Sensei Brad, now a senior master and the head judge of this year's tournament, jerked at the sound of the announcer mentioning the Carters. He looked up, and in that instant, our eyes met. That belt, he recognized it immediately. No mistake, it was Frank's belt, the man who nearly destroyed his father's career, the man who once dared to refuse silence, who dared to expose the system's lies. Though unsuccessful, Frank Carter remained a thorn in Sensei Brad's family's side. "This can't happen," Brad muttered. Immediately, he started pulling strings behind the scenes. In the judge's room, Brad whispered to his colleagues, "That girl isn't honest. She has attitude problems. Keep her score low." In the preliminaries, Emily performed the classic kata of the Carter style, a rare ancient variation few still knew. The audience gasped in admiration at every smooth movement, every decisive strike. But when the scores came in, 6.1, far too low to make the top cut. Emily frowned. She knew her performance wasn't perfect, but it wasn't that bad. Frank sat in the stands, calm but with his lips pressed tight. He saw his old student, Brad, playing dirty just like his father did back in 1983. Next round, Emily fought in sparring. She faced a physically stronger opponent who was much slower. Emily used speed and technique to rack up points. The assistant judge even gave her 3 points for a head kick, but then the points were revoked due to a system error. Frank stood up. For the first time in years, he wanted to shout, but Emily glanced at him and shook her head gently. She wasn't giving up. Meanwhile, Brad was sweating. That girl wasn't just a competitor. She was the shadow of the truth he and his father had tried to bury for so many years. And he knew if she made it to the finals, the truth would start to come to light. The semifinal round, where everything seemed to be building toward the most intense climax of the tournament. Emily stepped onto the mat, her eyes steady and hands firm, ready to face the strongest contender of the year, a tall, muscular young man with extensive ring experience. The match began at a breakneck speed. Emily's opponent relied on power and rapid attacks, but the petite girl possessed incredible agility and refined technique. Her strikes were fast, precise, and so powerful they left the audience breathless. Finally, in a move destined for history, Emily delivered a kick straight to her opponent's chin, knocking him down and out cold instantly. The entire arena erupted in cheers. Many rose to their feet, applauding a well-deserved victory. But then suddenly, Brad, the head judge, stood up and announced the decision. Emily had lost due to a serious technical fault in the knockout kick. An uproar of outrage erupted instantly. Parents, athletes, coaches, and even casual spectators couldn't believe their ears. They exchanged glances, then turned their suspicious eyes toward Brad. Immediately, videos of the match flooded social media, clearly showing Emily committed no fouls. Her knockout was completely legitimate. People began sharing nonstop, their comments growing increasingly fierce, condemning Brad and his blatant bias. Then, a major twist emerged. Another judge, usually quiet and discreet, unexpectedly sent Frank a secret recording. It captured an internal meeting of the judging panel before the tournament. Brad's voice was clear, ordering, "Eliminate that girl at all costs. She's a threat to my family and my reputation." Frank listened to the recording over and over, tears blurring his eyes from emotion. This was undeniable proof, an open door to exposing the truth. Emily also received the recording from Frank and immediately shared it online. The already outraged online community now united even more strongly behind her. Thousands of comments, shares, and calls for the tournament to reopen the investigation flooded in. Brad suddenly became the center of a fierce media and public storm. No place to hide, no more masks to cover the truth. As the media storm gradually engulfed Brad, Frank stood firmly by Emily's side, quietly thinking, there must be a way for the truth to be honored. That was when his old friend Mike, a veteran sports journalist with deep connections in the martial arts world, stepped in. Mike spent weeks digging through archives of newspapers and television stations, finally uncovering a treasure. An unreleased 1983 match footage, along with witness statements from longtime witnesses, statements that had been forcibly altered to twist the truth. The slow-motion footage showed every move between Frank and his opponent, clearly proving Frank fought fairly and the supposed broken arm strike never happened in the ring. Instead, the opponent had secretly attacked Frank backstage after the match. The original witness statements revealed that the opponent's coach, Brad's father, had orchestrated the scandal to sabotage Frank, turning him into a public villain. Without hesitation, Mike contacted a major TV network known for sports and social issues. The network agreed to air a special program, The Full Truth About the Old Case, featuring testimonies from living witnesses who had been Frank's colleagues and close friends. On the day the program aired, the entire sports community and the American public were stunned. People saw a completely different image of Frank. Not a violent attacker as the media had fabricated, but a talented, honorable, and courageous athlete. The public was even more shocked to learn that Frank was the only karateka in history to achieve absolute victories in 3 different weight classes, a record never before accomplished, and one that deserved to be celebrated loudly. But because of that, he had been erased, wiped out from the martial arts world for more than 3 decades, all due to the scandal orchestrated by Brad's father to protect his son. Emily, sitting beside Frank as the program aired, saw the relief in his eyes. For the first time in many years, the truth was acknowledged. But she knew the battle wasn't over. Brad and his family would surely strike back, but now they had no way out. In front of the screen, millions of viewers understood the story behind the false glory of the martial arts world and began demanding justice for Frank and Emily. That night, Frank called Emily. "Girl, this summer isn't just about learning karate. It's a fight for justice, for truth, and for our family's honor." Emily gripped the phone tightly, more determined than ever. Immediately after the special program about Frank and the 1983 scandal aired, the martial arts community and the American public were shaken to their core. The clear evidence of Brad and his father's fraud and slander could no longer be ignored. Faced with pressure from the public and sponsors, the organizers of the Texas Youth Tournament had no choice but to immediately suspend Brad's judging role. The police also launched a criminal investigation into the allegations of score fraud and violence against minors, charges Brad had deliberately covered up for years. Brad, once the kingpin of the regional karate scene, was now stripped of his competition rights, his reputation shattered, and facing the risk of imprisonment if the evidence of his assault on Emily was confirmed. The martial arts community was rocked to learn that Brad not only cheated, but also abused his power to bully and eliminate potential rivals like Emily. Meanwhile, Emily, the small but determined girl, was officially awarded the honorary victory of the Texas Youth Tournament, a triumph not just for her, but for justice and truth. The award ceremony was held in a solemn atmosphere, with the media and audience filling the hall. When invited to speak before hundreds of reporters and fans, Emily didn't mention Brad or anyone else involved. She simply spoke softly, her voice full of emotion. Justice is a long road, but the truth always has its own voice. If we persist and never give up, the light at the end will shine through every dark corner. I'm not fighting just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been misunderstood and treated unfairly. And I hope this story will inspire you, the young people seeking fairness in life. Emily's words moved the audience deeply and sparked a strong wave of support on social media. Thousands of comments, shares, and congratulations poured in, spreading the impact of her story far and wide. Frank, seated a few rows behind, looked at Emily with pride. All the hardships, pain, and years of silence had finally been rewarded. He knew this was only the beginnings, but it was a huge victory for truth and integrity. Meanwhile, the media closely followed every step of the investigation into Brad. News of his charges for fraud and violence spread quickly, shattering the image of the powerful judge many once admired. Brad's life and career became a cautionary tale in the martial arts community. Emily and Frank walked out of the hall to thunderous applause, but both understood the journey for justice was far from over. The challenges ahead would be many, but armed with the truth, they had the strength to see it through to the end. After months of turmoil, Sarah, Emily's mother, finally decided to overcome the barriers in her heart and meet Frank, the father she hadn't contacted in over 20 years. Their reunion took place in a small cafe, where the soft afternoon sunlight gently illuminated Frank's face, weathered by worry yet still full of warmth. They stood facing each other, hesitant and nervous. When Sarah saw Frank, old memories flooded back, both pain and hope. The little girl Emily once was had grown into a strong and resilient young woman, shaped by the love and lessons from her father. And it was that love that brought them back together. Suddenly, they embraced tightly, warm tears streaming down their cheeks. This was not just a reunion of two family members, but a healing of a once fractured family, a testament to the power of love and forgiveness. Not long after, Frank received a special invitation from the American Karate Federation to return with an honorary title, a delayed but meaningful recognition. He was honored not only for his skill and warrior spirit, but also as a symbol of perseverance, integrity, and honesty in sports. Emily continued her karate training every day, but now she fought not for titles or recognition, but for the profound lessons Frank had taught her: courage, determination, and faith in justice. Every punch, every move carried the strength of a will that would never bow to adversity. The story of Emily and Frank quickly became an inspiration for many young people across America. They understood that in life, sometimes a slap doesn't hurt as much as a harsh word, and an insult can leave a deeper wound than any bruise on the body. But the most important thing is not what we receive from others, but how we rise up and face challenges. Emily had been underestimated and rejected, but she used her resilience and courage to change her own story and even rewrite the history of the sport she loved. Frank smiled at his granddaughter on a peaceful afternoon. He knew life would bring many more challenges, but they had each other, and that was their greatest strength. Sometimes a slap can hurt, but the courage to stand up is what changes history forever. Story closes with a profound message. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to overcome fear while holding on to faith in truth and justice.